Hello everyone, what is up? Welcome back to another episode of Killer Instinct, you guys. Thank you so much for joining me here today. If you're new here, hi, my name is Savannah and I'm your host of Killer Instinct. Before we get started, make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That way you never miss an episode. We post weekly here on the podcast every single Wednesday. You guys are not going to want to miss it. We also upload the video version onto YouTube on Wednesdays as well, so make sure you are subscribed. Now, with that being said, you guys, we have a couple things to go over before we jump into today's episode. The first one being Happy November. I am very excited to be jumping into a new month with you guys, and I also just wanted to take this time to thank you so incredibly much for such a successful Halloween. I hope that you guys enjoyed Halloween as much as I did. I've said it before, but the idea of jumping back into Halloween for another year was not something I was completely 100% certain on up until pretty recently before Halloween began, and I was just so excited to see how excited you guys were every single day for those 4 episodes of Halloween. It was just really a cool thing to see. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for your support on that. It truly does mean the absolute world to me. And with that being said, I do want to kind of take a moment to talk about something that I didn't get the chance to talk to you about last week, but is very important for you guys to know, especially for my video listeners. You may or may not have realized, if you're watching me on YouTube, that we have reworked this channel a little bit. Now, prior to this change, Killer Instinct episodes were uploaded on YouTube under the Savannah channel. However, as of recently, that has changed, and this channel from here on out is solely going to be dedicated to Killer Instinct. As you can see, we have changed the channel name from Savannah to Killer Instinct Podcast. Now, some of you may or may not know, I got my start in social media with lifestyle content, and then I added the true crime content in shortly after that, and that is also not going anywhere. The lifestyle content is here to stay, but it is going to be on a separate channel. Some of you also may know that I have a lifestyle podcast called My Thoughts Exactly, and up until this point, both of those podcasts were living under the Savannah channel. However, I have decided to go ahead and separate the two. Now, there are many, many reasons that we decided to do this, but all in all, it really just comes down to wanting to have 2 separate channels for 2 very different podcasts. Both podcasts in both genres deserve to have their own designated home on YouTube, so that is what we did. So if you want to check out the lifestyle channel, I will have that in the description box below. I will also pin it in a comment. It will be on my Instagram. That way you can go check out the channel and subscribe. That way you get double the content every week. We post weekly there every single Friday for My Thoughts Exactly, and that is where we also post other weekly lifestyle videos as well. So I wanted to put that out there just so you guys are kind of all on the same page with me as to where we are going with the direction of this channel, because I know some of you in the comments of Halloween, I saw comments saying that you were confused, you didn't know what this channel was at first because you're used to seeing my name instead of Killer Instinct Podcast. So I wanted to just kind of clear that up so we're all on the same page moving forward. I'm super excited about this new era for Killer Instinct, and I'm just ready to take it to the next level with you guys. So I wanted to just take a moment and tell you that. But with that all being said, let's talk about this new month. We are in a new month. It is November, which means we are at the beginning of a new true crime category. And to keep up with the spirit of the holidays, we are dedicating November to Thanksgiving murders. For the next 4 weeks, we are going to be diving into murders that occurred around Thanksgiving time, that occurred on Thanksgiving, and we are starting out with a diabolically twisted murder today. As you can tell by the title of today's episode, today we are talking about the brutal murder of Joel and Lisa Guy. And without giving anything away, let's jump right on into it. Joel Guy was born on February 10th, 1955, and worked as a pipeline engineering designer, and he was married to his wife, Lisa. Lisa was born on August 8th, 1961, and she worked as an HR accountant administrator at Jacobs Engineering. Now, when Lisa and Joel first met, Lisa was drawn to Joel's charm and his humor. From the beginning beginning of them dating, Lisa knew that she wanted to spend the rest of her life with Joel, and the feeling was mutual. Joel was equally head over heels for Lisa, and the two of them got married in 1985. After getting married, they settled down in Knoxville, Tennessee, where they started their family. They had 3 daughters, Shandace, Michelle, and Angela, and then a few years later, they had their son, Joel Jr. Now, as their kids got older and began to start families of their own, Joel and Lisa found themselves with 6 grandchildren, and Joel and Lisa absolutely loved being grandparents. They loved spending time with their grandchildren. They loved doing outdoor activities, whether that be with each other or with the rest of their family. They loved hiking. They loved fishing. They loved going for boat rides and being out on the water. Anything where they could just disconnect and unplug from the world and spend time with each other was the times that they cherished the most. Now, this case begins in 2016, and at this point, Joel and Lisa had gotten to a time in their lives where they were in their golden years, so to speak, and they were gearing up and getting ready for retirement. They had sold their home in Knoxville and were planning on moving out and beginning a new chapter. And so, because of this, they were going to be spending their last Thanksgiving in this home in 2016. Everyone in the family was really looking forward to this specific Thanksgiving. It had a lot of significance for the family because it was the ending of one chapter and the beginning of another. Thanksgiving was always a great time for the Guy family. It was a time where they all could get together and again, just soak up memories of them as a family. So on November 24th, 2016, which was Thanksgiving Day, Joel and Lisa had 2 of their children over to the home. They had their son, Joel Jr., as well as Michelle, and Michelle brought her boyfriend and her sons. For all things considered, this was an incredibly memorable Thanksgiving. It was a joy-filled Thanksgiving that was spent with good conversation, and everyone was just reminiscing on all of the memories that had been made in this home. Again, this was a very nostalgic time for everyone, and everyone was really just soaking up the time that they had together. 4 days after Thanksgiving, on November 28th, which was a Monday, Jacobs Engineering Company was planning a retirement party for Lisa. However, she never showed up for work that day. Now, Lisa knew that this celebration was happening, so for her to not show up and just not tell anyone why didn't feel right. It was also very out of Lisa's character. She would always tell her work if she was going to be showing up late or if she was calling out sick, and for her to not show up to her own retirement party and not tell anyone was very unsettling. And what was more concerning was that no one was able to get a hold of Lisa either. She wasn't answering her cell phone, she wasn't answering her home phone, and she just wasn't returning calls. And again, this behavior was very unlike her, so her supervisor felt compelled enough to go ahead and call the sheriff's department and ask the sheriff's department to do a wellness check on Lisa, which they agreed to do. Shortly after this call was made, the sheriff's department drove over to Joel and Lisa's home, which was located in the Golden View Lane neighborhood in Knoxville. And for all things considered, this was a very nice area. It was a very low crime neighborhood, and Lisa and Joel lived in a 2-story brick home. Now, when the police officer arrived to the home, he saw that there were 2 cars parked in the driveway, and he went up to the front door, knocked on the door, however, never received an answer. He tried going around to the back of the home, but there was a gate that interfered with him getting into the backyard. So the officer radioed into the dispatch that they knocked on the door and did not receive an answer, and then they left the home. Now, after another hour had passed and Lisa still had not shown up for her party, there was another employee who called the sheriff's department a second time, and this time it was to report Lisa missing. Now, again, this was about an hour after that initial wellness check was made, and at this point, several officers went back to Lisa and Joel's residence, and before approaching the home, they noticed that one of Lisa and Joel's neighbors was actually in their driveway. So they went over to the neighbor and they asked this neighbor if they had heard or seen from Lisa and Joel recently. And while this neighbor said said that they hadn't personally had any communication with Lisa and Joel, they did know that they were home for Thanksgiving because their children were there at the house. But again, that was really the extent of the information that this neighbor was able to give. Now, going back to the house where police saw Lisa and Joel's cars, they were able to look up the license plates and saw and confirmed that these were in fact Lisa and Joel's vehicles. Now, this really raised police's suspicions because if their cars were in the driveway, you would think that that would mean that they were home. And if they were home, why wouldn't they be able to answer the door? Now, at that time, police started to look through the windows of the house, and this is when they noticed that there were several grocery bags laying in the entryway of the home. Now, police were able to see some of these items that were inside of these plastic bags, and they did note that some of the items needed to either be refrigerated or put in the freezer. It looked like someone had placed the bags down with the intention of putting the groceries away. However, obviously, they still weren't, so that raised red flags as well. Now, it's unclear which car it was, but one of Lisa or Joel's cars was unlocked at the time, so police were able to open the car and found a garage door opener, which gave them access to inside of the home. Now, as police were walking through the opened garage, they began announcing themselves and calling out to see if anyone was home. However, there was no answer, but what they did note was that there was a dog howling coming from inside. So police were aware that there was some sort of dog inside of the home. However, other than that, there was no response and no answer to them. Now, at this point, police then moved their way from the garage to the interior of the home. And upon entering the house, police said that the first thing they noticed was the drastic increase in temperature from outside to inside. Police said that from outside to inside, it felt like a 15 to 20 degree jump in temperature. And not only was it incredibly warm inside, but they also noticed that it felt like there were chemicals in the air. There was a thick chemical feel. But that was not all. As they continued to walk through the home, they walked past the dining room and noticed that on the dining room table, there were multiple guns that were laid out. And these were a mixture of larger guns and some smaller handguns. And this was obviously a red flag to police. This was not something that you would typically see or normally find, and they did not know what this meant at that particular time, but they had to continue canvassing the rest of the house. They then walked upstairs, and as they were walking up the stairs of the home, they could smell a very odd and strange odor coming from upstairs. It was so strong that some of the officers actually said it was burning their eyes. And again, they repeatedly said that it felt like a strong chemical. But along with that, police also noticed on their way up the stairs that there was blood spatter on the wall that had dripped down to the floor on the carpet of the stairs. Obviously, seeing any sort of blood is a red flag, and it made police fear the worst. And when they arrived to the top of the steps, one officer turned to the right while other officers turned to the left, canvassing the remaining area of that second story. Now, the officer that turned to the right, he was then led to the primary bedroom. Now, for the officers that turned to the left side of the second story was where the guest bedrooms were. It was also where the gym was and the bonus room of upstairs was. And while police were leading themselves into that end room, that bonus room, that is when they noticed that there was a massive amount of blood in the corner of this room. But that was not all. This is when police also discovered a pair of dismembered hands. Now, these hands were in a position where the fingers were pointing upright, and immediately when police saw this, they knew that something absolutely horrifying had taken place here. Now, the forensic team did take note of the hands, and they noticed how they were placed. Again, the hands were placed upright, the fingers were pointing up, but the hands were almost placed in what looked like a prayer position. The fingers were intertwined and the hands were standing upright. It definitely appeared that these hands had been staged in a certain way, and detectives said that the hands were severed with such concise precision that it almost appeared to be a surgical cut. So the hands were discovered in that bonus room on the second story, but for the officer who went to the right and went to the primary bedroom, when he walked into the primary bedroom, he also stumbled onto a very disturbing scene. When he walked into the master bedroom, he saw multiple materials laying on the floor, such as peroxide. There were kitchen timers and plastic bags. And as he walked into the primary bathroom, that is when he discovered two blue large tubs. These were big plastic containers, and inside of each container was human remains. Now, once the hands and the plastic tubs with the human remains had been discovered, the sheriff's department cleared every other room in the house. They wanted to ensure that there wasn't anyone hiding inside of the home. They wanted to make sure that whoever was responsible for this wasn't there waiting to attack police as well. They also took the dog that was inside of the home over to the neighbor's house while they finished conducting the investigation. And even though at that time, police were not able to 100% confirm that the human remains did belong to Lisa and Joel, they weren't able to do that without a DNA match. They were very confident that that is who the remains belonged to. Everything of Lisa and Joel's still remained inside of the home. Their wallets were there, their cell phones, their car keys, their cars were found right in the driveway. So again, they still had to wait on those DNA results, but they were confident that that is who the remains belonged to. But with that, police started to speculate who could possibly want to hurt Joel and Lisa in such a horrific way, and what motive would they have to want to do this? Now, detectives began canvassing the neighborhood at this point and asking the neighbors about Lisa and Joel. However, no one had anything alarming to say. All of the neighbors doted on Lisa and Joel and said that they were a very nice couple. They kept to themselves and they were incredibly family oriented. So with that, detectives now needed to turn to Lisa and Joel's children to ask them about their parents. Now, detectives initially met with Michelle, who was again the daughter that was at Thanksgiving, to notify her about what they found inside of her parents' home. Now, as you can imagine, Michelle was incredibly distraught and absolutely devastated with this news. She told detectives that the last time that she saw her parents was on Thanksgiving. She said that her boyfriend, her kids, as well as her brother were at Thanksgiving with her parents, and that nothing seemed to be off or out of the ordinary at this time. She also told detectives that she would be the one to notify the remainder of her siblings about their parents' death, and told police that she would provide pictures of everyone who was there at this Thanksgiving celebration. Back at Lisa and Joel's home, the forensic team arrived to canvass the crime scene. And again, similar to police, one of the first things that the forensic team noticed was the temperature in the house. They saw that all of the thermostats had been set as high as the temperature could go, which was about 90 degrees. And along with that, several of the space heaters that Joel and Lisa had were turned on in different areas throughout the home as well. Now, what this meant for police and to the forensic team was that whoever did this was well thought out in their plan. They knew that when you increase the temperature in a room, it makes it more difficult for DNA and fingerprints to be left behind. So again, it only confirmed police's suspicions that this was a well thought out, planned, meticulous murder. Now, on the second floor, the forensic team also found several different articles of clothing. They found several t-shirts, jeans, underwear, a bra that had been cut with what appeared to be a pair of scissors. There was also blood spatter on the walls and, like I said, the floor. Again, in the bonus room where the hands were discovered, the forensic team found multiple signs that this was an attack. They believe that whoever did this to Joel and Lisa had caught them off guard. Other than the obvious, which were the severed hands and the massive amount of blood, there were also knife marks in the couch, and some of the workout equipment that was in the room had been turned over. And so again, this only furthered police's suspicions that this was an attack, that Joel was caught off guard at this time, and that this is where the beginning of the attack took place. Now, what police were also able to discover was the entire murder was done by hand. There was no gunshot wounds on the victims. It was purely stabbing and dismembering, which meant to police that whoever did this had an incredible amount of aggression and the knowledge to carry out the murder the way that they did. And this was frightening for police to think about because they did not know what they were looking at here. They did not know what they were dealing with at the time. They didn't know if this was a contract kill or if there was a serial killer on the loose in Knoxville. But what they did know is that this was a very cold-blooded, calculated kill. Now, the forensic team did go in and collect all of the remains. They put them in body bags and sent them off to the lab, which was where they were able to confirm what police already suspected, which was that the remains did belong to Joel and Lisa. The severed hands were a match to Joel, and the remains of Lisa were confirmed through the DNA on her toothbrush. Now, back at home, as police walked through the primary bedroom, they saw more equipment that was used to help carry out this murder. They discovered a knife, medical gloves, more chemicals, but they also found several receipts for these items. There was a Walmart receipt that showed the purchase of rubbing alcohol and peroxide, as well as several other items, and the receipt was dated for November 26th, so 2 days after Thanksgiving, and also 2 days prior to Lisa and Joel being reported missing. Now, police also discovered that there was a receipt left in the groceries that were found downstairs, and those groceries were also purchased at Walmart, so they had that receipt as well. Now, with this, police went down to that Walmart and asked to see all of the surveillance footage. They wanted to know who had purchased the groceries, and they wanted to know who had purchased the other items that were found in the master bedroom as well. Now, when they did this, they saw that as far as the groceries were concerned, Lisa was the one who purchased the groceries at 12:18 p.m. on November 26th. And based off of this information, police theorized that after purchasing the groceries, Lisa arrived home, placed the bags in the entryway of the home with every intention of putting them away, but instead she was somehow lured upstairs where she was ultimately attacked and murdered. Now, police really have no way to 100% confirm who was killed first, whether that was Joel or Lisa. However, based off of the information, it is likely that Joel was murdered while Lisa was at the grocery store, and Lisa was killed shortly after she arrived home. But again, that was only one out of the two receipts that police had. They had the grocery receipt, but they also had that second receipt for all the other materials. So now they were focusing on that. They canvassed through all of the surveillance footage from that Walmart, and that is when they discovered something very suspicious. Police identified through the surveillance footage that Joel Jr., Joel and Lisa's son, was shopping at that Walmart. Now, police were able to identify him because Michelle had given a picture to the detectives of everyone who was at Thanksgiving just a few days prior, so they knew what Joel Jr. looked like. But again, up until this point, police believed that Joel Jr. went home after Thanksgiving. That is what Michelle had told police. Joel Jr. had lived in Baton Rouge, Louisiana at the time of the murders, and Michelle had told police that after Thanksgiving, Joel Jr. had went home. So they were surprised when they saw Joel Jr. on the surveillance footage. Police also found it odd that Joel Jr. was at this same Walmart 3 hours after his mom Lisa was there, and also they were able to figure out that Joel Jr. purchased his items in cash. Now, even though it was a cash purchase, police were able to see through the surveillance footage some of the items that he did buy, which included peroxide and Band-Aids. It also appeared that Joel Jr. had an injury to his hand. He had a large cut on his hand that appeared to be bleeding, which is why police believe he bought those Band-Aids. So with this information, it really does change the direction of this case because, again, up until this point, police believed that Joel Jr. was back at home. They believed that Joel Jr. left immediately after Thanksgiving. They had no idea that Joel Jr. stayed around for a couple days afterwards. Now, obviously, with this new finding, police wanted to speak with Joel Jr., but they first circled back to his sister Michelle, who, again, they had previously spoken to. Now, she confirmed that Joel Jr. did return back to Baton Rouge after Thanksgiving, but she wasn't able to confirm when exactly he had left her parents' house. She also elaborated more in this conversation about their Thanksgiving. She said that the Thanksgiving itself was very normal, but there was something that was a little bit different. And that thing that was different was the fact that Joel Jr. was there. Typically, she said that Joel Jr. did not spend holidays or most days at all with his family. He was a little bit more of the outcast of the family. Now, police also got some more information about Joel Jr. in general. Michelle went on to say that growing up, Joel Jr. spent most of his time at boarding school, which was entirely his own choice. He actually insisted on going to boarding school growing up, and then afterwards, he went to college, and he actually remained in college up until the time that he was 28. And for the entirety of Joel Jr.'s life, Joel and Lisa, his parents, paid for absolutely everything. They paid his rent for his apartment, they paid for his groceries, his utilities. Everything in Joel Jr.'s life was paid for by his parents. Now, Michelle pointed out that Joel Jr. was not a very social person, and he was especially not someone who liked to spend time with his family, which is why she found it odd that he was there for Thanksgiving. And he was also abnormally social. Michelle said that he, again, was more of a recluse, more of a loner. And on Thanksgiving, he definitely put on this persona of this loving uncle to her kids. He was outgoing, he was laughing, and it was a behavior that she had never seen from Joel Jr. before, and she noted it as odd. So obviously, after speaking with Michelle, police needed to find Joel Jr. and they began traveling. The Knoxville police began traveling from Knoxville to Baton Rouge, which is where Joel Jr. lived. They were traveling to his apartment. Now, police were able to gather more information on their way down to Baton Rouge, and they figured out through license plate readers that Joel Jr. returned back to Baton Rouge on Sunday, the 27th of November. Now, the Knoxville police did reach out to the homicide division in Baton Rouge, and they asked them to conduct surveillance on Joel Jr. while they were traveling down, just to keep an eye on him, which the Baton Rouge Homicide Department did. Now, while this was happening, back at the forensics lab in Knoxville, detectives discovered a sinister and horrifying piece of this puzzle. When detectives were clearing out Joel and Lisa's home, they were collecting all of the evidence that they could, which included a backpack. They stumbled across this backpack, and inside of the backpack, they found a journal. However, what appeared to be a journal on the outside actually turned out to be a murder manifesto. Inside of this journal was a written out step-by-step guide on how to get away with murder. There were actually bullet points written down, and I'm going to read some of them off to you. In the journal, it stated, 1. Get killing knives. Quiet, multiple carving knives to make small pieces. 2. Get sledgehammer to crush bones. 3. Bring blender and food grinder to grind meat. 4. Get bleach. 5. Get plastic bin for denaturation process. Does not matter where they're killed, just get rid of bloody spots to prevent evidence of time of death. 6. Get rid of bodies inside house. There in my DNA was already there. 7. Flush chunks down the toilet, not the garbage disposal. 8. Get plastic sheeting for disposal process. 9. He's not alive to claim her hand the insurance money. All mine. 10. Turn up the heater as high as it goes. Speeds decomposition. Don't have to get rid of the body if there is no forensic evidence on the body. So as you can see, this is a detailed step-by-step plan on how to get away with murder. And as far as who the notebook belonged to, it was pretty easy for police to figure this out because inside of that same backpack where the notebook was, there were other items such as books and a syllabus for a college class that was being taken in the fall by none other than Joel Jr. But this manifesto itself was the most substantial piece of evidence against Joel Jr. that police police had up until this point. This was an entire plan written out by him on how he was going to murder his parents and get away with it. Now, on another page of the notebook, Joel Jr. wrote out all of the assets that his parents had, including the house, how much it was worth, the net worth of his parents, and how much Joel Jr. would inherit in the event of his parents passing. And this right here gave police motive. Joel Jr. murdered his parents to collect life insurance money on them. Like I mentioned in the beginning, Joel and Lisa were planning to retire, and Michelle actually told the detectives that her parents had told Joel Jr. months prior to Thanksgiving that they were not going to continue to fund his life anymore. They told him several months prior to Thanksgiving that they were going to be cutting him off right after Christmas time. So right then and there, that gives police a motive. But at first, police were confused as to why Joel Jr. would go to the lengths that he did. He would write out this manifesto. He would be as detailed as he was in these killings, but he would leave behind the most crucial piece of evidence, which was the notebook. It seemed like a sloppy mistake. But police theorized that Joel Jr.'s plan got thrown off when he ended up injuring his own hand. They believed that this was not a part of his plan, and it made him frazzled because he thought that it was possible that his blood could be mixed in to the other DNA that was found on the crime scene, and so he needed to leave as soon as possible. That was the theory on Joel Jr.'s mindset, because not only did Joel Jr. leave the notebook and the backpack, he also left his laptop behind, he left the dog in the guest room. So police theorized that Joel Jr.'s plan was to return back to the house at some point. However, police got there before he was able to. Now, while police were on their drive down to Baton Rouge, the Baton Rouge Police Department called the Knoxville detectives and told them that on Monday, November 28th, Joel Jr. had purchased a gun at a local firearms store, and that surveillance had showed that he still had that injury on his hand and that there was actually blood on the paperwork when he signed the papers for the gun. Now, what this meant to police was that Joel Jr. was now confirmed to be armed, and the Knoxville police then directed the Baton Rouge police to arrest Joel Jr. if given the opportunity. So the Baton Rouge Police Department remained outside surveillancing his apartment and waited until Joel Jr. came outside, and when he did, they immediately arrested him and took him into custody. Now, the Knoxville police went down to the Baton Rouge Police Department to speak with Joel Jr., but when they sat down with him, Joel Jr. refused to talk. He refused to say anything to them, and he also didn't ask any questions. He didn't ask why he was there. He didn't ask why he was arrested. Joel Jr. knew at that point that he had been caught. Now, detectives then went back to Joel Jr.'s apartment to search through there, and in the apartment, they made more unsettling discoveries. They found a giant plastic tub in the shower, and again, inside of the tub was a similar chemical mixture and what appeared to be a dog bone inside of the chemical concoction. Now, police believed that Joel Jr. was trying to perfect his chemical mixture to see how long it would take for that dog bone to decompose. Now, there were also many receipts found in Joel Jr.'s apartment, including receipts for the knives that were used to murder Joel and Lisa. They also discovered that Joel Jr. began purchasing the items that he was going to use to murder his parents up to 18 days before the killings took place. These findings are just incredibly unsettling for so many reasons, but one of which is the fact that Joel Jr. was at his parents' house on Thanksgiving, acting bubbly, acting outgoing, acting social, all while knowing that he was going to brutally murder and dismember his parents within days after the celebration. Now, Joel Jr. did plead not guilty to the murder of his parents, and the trial began in December of 2020. The trial took place over the course of 4 days, and in the trial, the prosecution presented the evidence that during the murder, Joel was stabbed over 42 times and that the blade went 6 to 7 inches into his body. His body was then dismembered at his shoulders, his wrists, and his hips. His clothing was then cut off with a pair of scissors. Now, Lisa's autopsy also showed that she had been stabbed 31 times and was then dismembered at her elbows and her knees. Both Lisa and Joel's remains were then placed in the blue tubs with the chemical concoction where they were left to decompose. Now, during the trial, Joel Jr. did not seem fazed whatsoever. He was actually seen laughing on several occasions. He did not have any emotion other than laughing, which was very unsettling for obvious reasons. But ultimately, Joel Jr. was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder, as well as 2 counts of abuse of a corpse, and he was given 2 life sentences, totaling 124 years in prison. Joel Jr. has tried to appeal his conviction, however, it has been denied, and he will remain in prison for the rest of his life. And that, you guys, is the case of Joel and Lisa Guy. I'm very curious to hear what you have to say about it. I'm so curious to know your opinions. Please let me know in the comments below. But with that being said, you guys, that is all for me today. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Killer Instinct. Again, if you're new here, hi, my name's Savannah, and I'm your host of Killer Instinct. Make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. We post weekly here on the podcast every single Wednesday. You're not going to want to miss it. I'll be back next week with a brand new one for you guys. And until then, stay safe. Bye, guys.